Welcome to Inviting Oneness, a podcast where we explore true personal stories from friends and members of EquaSion. Stories where the illusion of separateness gave way to the deeper truth of our shared humanity. Oneness isn't an idea, it's an experience. And today we continue listening for it, one story at a time. Our guest today is Aasees Kaur. Aasees currently serves as Community Development Director at the Sikh Coalition. She is also a personal friend and board member at EquaSion. Here's Aasees.
Moment of oneness that really stands out to me. I think it's been about 8 years since this event happened. I want to say at some point in 2017. Normally when I hear people talk about oneness, it feels like they may be describing a moment in nature or like a deep moment of meditation. And as I was trying to think of a story I wanted to share today, things kind of connected backwards for me. So I hope it'll also make sense to you. But this is sometime in 2017. This moment happened through work. You know that I've been in the civil rights space for several years now, and I used to be our first line of defense, used to just be very hands-on in the trenches all the time type of thing. And I remember this one case very well. A sick man, there were attempts to suffocate him by putting a towel over his nose and mouth. His turban was knocked off and he was struck in the head and sustained some severe injuries. I won't go too deep into the details of the case. I mean, it's been about 8 years, but just very brutal, very dehumanizing, very egregious hate violence. It didn't happen to someone in my family, but I was involved in the aftermath of it as an advocate. And I touch somewhere between 250 to 300 cases a year. And even though it's been 8 years since this one, I remember the imprints it left on me. So everything goes to court. You know, it's very clear what has happened, that his religious identity was attacked. Those things are very clear. But something that completely rocked my boat in the most positive sense was a letter that we received from the person who had done this, where in the system, right, we would label them as an attacker, the perpetrator, someone who has inflicted harm. We received this letter. I've never been able to delete that PDF. I think I've switched my phones 3-4 times since 2017, and I still have that on my phone. It's a letter that starts with him describing the 3 streets of sorrow in his life and what led to this moment where he saw, and to kind of anonymize the identity of the individual involved in the attack, we'll call him Mr. Singh, how he saw him as the enemy and he saw him as someone he had been trained to attack. But he describes his 3 streets of sorrow. He described an incident where his sister had died. He described when his buddy was hurt during a military operation out in the field. And then this was his 3rd street of sorrow in his life. And someone who had, if systems trained him to view people of, different backgrounds from one part of the hemisphere as enemies, I'd say I was fully trained to advocate, to go gung-ho. This is in court. We're going to figure this out. It never left me. His letter, his words, it never left me. So I feel like this moment of oneness came to me in the aftermath of violence, not necessarily in a moment of sunset or a moment of deep meditation, or where I'm surrounded by people who get it and people who are supportive and uplifting and encouraging, but in the aftermath of bloody violence, where someone's head had been struck with a weapon and turban had been knocked off. And the impact of his letter really was a moment when I felt that his suffering and our pain in the aftermath of this traumatic event are really not separate. He was stuck in his own cycle of losses and pain that I can only imagine. He was in a space where systems had failed him. right? He has and had PTSD and other mental health issues and wasn't able to get the help. He was crying for help a week before, and he should have never been released. And maybe this encounter with Mr. Singh would have never happened had he been in an inpatient facility. So he had his own cycles and systems that failed him. But it wasn't until that I saw his words written pen to paper that I realized that his suffering, our pain, our suffering are really not separate. And in that moment, it felt to experience oneness and to try to practice that is to look at someone who you very well may be justified to quote unquote hate and feel strongly about, and instead look at their humanity, that their grief and their pain and their brokenness in a different set of circumstances could very well be mine. Everything in this world tells us that we're separate. Everything. It's a binary. It's either this or that, right? We live in black and white. We live in this duality. Someone that harms us, hurts us, becomes quote unquote the monster. Someone that wears a turban and has a beard and a brown skin becomes othered. A veteran with PTSD becomes dangerous. A person with any kind of mental health issues becomes dangerous. And we keep living in these categories that are designed and that are working to shrink our compassion. So to me, this moment felt like to not let that compassion shrink and to extend that compassion to parts of the world and the people that we may otherwise be afraid of is practicing oneness, to extending that compassion. I remember there was a time I was asked to sort of come guest teach a class about peace. And I remember saying in there, right, peace isn't just the absence of war. It's so much more than that. And similarly, I feel that oneness isn't just the absence of harm. It is also so much more than that. It's our firm refusal to dehumanize somebody, even when harm has occurred. So I feel like it is only when we capital K know and learn someone's stories, and I'm going to say we return to the much deeper truth and not like we learn it. I think we have it in ourselves. We've just kind of wandered off. But it is knowing and learning someone else's stories that helps us return to that much deeper truth that there is no them. There is only us. That's all there is to it. And I did say that I would come back to nature in a very, I'm going to go counterclockwise. Nature also reminds us that what we consider destructive isn't bad, right? When wildfires happen, when temperatures get to a certain degree, that sometimes that is what is required for a certain type of seed to germinate, for some pollination to happen, for the weeds to be taken care of. I remember when I was in St. Lucia, I was looking at the mountains there and realizing that the lush and the green and the beauty I was seeing was a product of lava, was a product of explosion and, quote unquote destruction, right? When we think of Hawaii, we think of the hibiscus and how beautiful it is, how gorgeous it is to be there, how refreshing and life-giving it is. But it came from something that we don't consider life-giving. So I feel that similarly, these incidents that happen that we see as things that take away from us. But just like nature tells us, right? A caterpillar turns into a butterfly, lava turns into lush. These things happen, things evolve, things change, things grow. Similarly, these moments of pain and suffering and destructive moments that happen can, lead us back to feel like there is still life in all of this. There's still oneness, that things aren't as broken as we think they are, or destruction isn't necessarily bad, or these destructive moments that happen aren't necessarily bad. So it feels like it's, practicing oneness. It's not a theory. It really is a practice. It's a discipline you have to develop. It's an active choice. It's an option for us to make that daily active choice if we're going to look underneath, see our shared human challenges and vulnerabilities, to then be able to recognize someone else's pain. And this isn't to say, right, I'm still that fierce advocate. Still need to fight the good fight, get in some good trouble. But it is to say that consequences and empathy can coexist, right? Restorative justice isn't something that we can save for an outlier case where we feel someone deserves that version of justice, but consequences and empathy can coexist. Because think of the bravery it took for this man to put all of that on paper and express that. And I think it is that compassion that will strengthen justice, right? Him saying this, and even 8 years down the line, me feeling that restorative justice is a better path, that consequences and empathy can coexist, didn't soften my pursuit for justice. I think it instead strengthens how we can heal, how we can recover, and how we can pursue justice. No one's humanity is beyond reach, and no one is void of that humanity. We just need to look for that to realize that there's no them, there's only us.
So we've been doing this podcast for about 8 months. The frame and the prompt for this podcast, the idea of inviting oneness, was inspired by Chip Harrod, the former executive director of EquaSion. And I remember when he introduced the frame, I thought, I have to talk to Aasees about this. And I've been trying to get you on the podcast for a minute, and you did not disappoint. So thanks so much for making that happen. There were 2 reasons why I thought I needed to talk to you about this prompt. The first one is, it feels to me like one of the gifts of the Sikh tradition is this orientation towards oneness. It's a very authentically Sikh thing, right? The second thing is that I have experienced oneness with you in a shared experience of sorrow as well as in friendship. And so I want to just invite you just for a second to talk about what is the gift of oneness within the Sikh tradition and how do you normally experience it, like on a day-to-day basis?
The core foundation of the Sikh faith is rooted in Oankar, which we can loosely translate to there's one divine being that's everlasting. Is here before us, here in the now, in the present, and will be here long after we're gone. And to put it very simply, if there is one, there can't be two. If it just is there a good and a bad? Is there a heaven and a hell? Is there holy and unholy? Or unholy and sacred? If there's just one, do these things exist in such black and white worlds, or is it just is? And I firmly believe that there is only one. There's nothing that comes before one. The number 0 on its own doesn't mean anything. For 0 to have value, you need to put it after something. So even from like that numerical scientific way of thinking, there is nothing before that. And you can't divide one. That doesn't exist either. So this practice that there is only one, Ik Oankar, there's one shared light, one shared divinity in everything within our universe, is the core belief. And for me, the practice of that has become sort of going through some of these tougher moments and even day-to-day lives, like as much as I can in a meditative state, like staying calm and staying balanced through these moments that sometimes ask us to peak up or peak down, and trying to find that equilibrium that, okay, just as much as there is joy, there is sorrow. Good things happened, not so good things happen. How we reconcile that is what brings me back that there is only one. We're not separate from each other. Even in a very scientific way, energy is never lost. It changes form, it transforms, it evolves, but energy is not lost. So trying to put that in practice of civil rights and human rights can sometimes be tough. This year has been putting out a lot of fires in that respect. But coming back to maybe some of these things are cyclical. And it is a moment for us to learn everyone's story so we can return to the deeper truth that there is only one. That we're all one people, we all live together, we're all human family, we've got this universe, and that's what we need to be grateful for. So I feel like the oneness and the gratitude and the compassion, it all, for me at least, kind of works together. It's not always easy. I don't do it all the time. It's hard. But at least having, some of these very core examples of like when I thought I would feel a certain way about somebody, but then experiencing their truth and realizing we need to sometimes resist those visceral gut reactions, kind of need to check ourselves, because even if someone with the best of intentions can view another person as that, right? Like we need to do a little bit more work on ourselves before we expect anything else in the world to change, right? We need that internal revolution of kind of freeing ourselves from these black and white hard lines that we've drawn. So this moment was about 8 years ago. And I would say other life experiences that have followed, especially since 2022, really have taught me that things are not as hard and fast as we think they are. Things are very flexible. Most things and most life happens in the blurred areas, and we need to be able to roll with all of that.
Yeah, I love that so much, Aasees. So for the folks who are listening to this, is there one encouragement or piece of advice that you can give them so that they can prepare themselves to experience the reality of oneness today in their life?
I think if we believe that all beings have inherent dignity, then we need to force ourselves to love, defend, protect, and respect everyone as our equals. If we want to be a community of equals, I need to be able to, I don't know your neighbor's name, but I need to be able to defend, protect, stand up, respect, and love your neighbor as my own, as I would you, right? I know you, but I don't know Joey's neighbor. But I should be able to do the exact same thing for Joey's neighbor as I would for Joey. If we can try to start with that, even with like small moments, right? If your Uber's late, if your food delivery gets messed up, if something else happens, right? Start with the smaller things that in the big picture are inconsequential, but then we build a practice, right? And as we build a practice, it'll become second nature to apply the same principles to bigger things, right? You've got 2 little ones. You know that at first they need help walking. They need to practice their walking. But you don't need to always help them with that, right? They take off running because it becomes second nature. So similarly to that, if we practice these things at first with smaller moments of life that we know will not matter 5 minutes, 50 minutes, 5 years from now, 5 months from now, it'll help us build our practice towards things that actually may shake us at our core, but we'll be able to get to the same outcome because we've been practicing through these smaller moments in life.
Thanks for joining us on Inviting Oneness, where we share real stories of connection that dissolve the illusion of separation and reveal our common humanity. To learn more about our work at EquaSion, or to share your own story of oneness, visit us at EquaSion.org. To honor Chip Harrod's legacy, we invite you to invest in the Chip Harrod Transformative Dialogue Fund. EquaSion's year-end giving campaign continues to the end of December. For decades, Chip Harrod, EquaSion's founder and former executive director, brought people together across faith, race, and ideology. Chip retired this year, but EquaSion is continuing his work through the Chip Harrod Fund for Transformative Dialogue. Dialogue can give us a way forward. When we sit together, listen honestly, and share our stories, something shifts. Understanding grows, trust grows, community grows. This is the work Chip dedicated his life to, and it's the work we must continue. We've already raised $40,000, and we're launching a $40,000 match from Giving Tuesday through December 31st to double the value of every gift. Until next time, may we keep inviting oneness within ourselves and with one another.